Well, here we are again with some Russell Brand. I am being smart about this time because the last few times we've tried to watch Russell Brand and make a segment out of it, it was clips from his podcast, which is largely him bringing on somebody and saying a bunch of like very hollow shit a lot of times, and Russell going, yeah, right, yeah, sure. And this time, we're going to be listening to a video called The Truth. And I know in this complicated world, to really get to the nitty-gritty of this whole debate surrounding like Joe Rogan and censorship and Spotify, nobody could have a more thoroughly logical and intellectual take than Russell Brand. So...
yes, it's another video about Joe Rogan as he addresses the misinformation controversy that threatens to have him pulled from Spotify. We ask, are some types of misinformation more deadly than other types of misinformation? And are...
why would you ask that question? Isn't it very obvious? Like, yes. Yes. Some misinformation is obviously more dangerous than other misinformation. Like, if you think that the earth is flat, you're pretty much harmless. But if you think that, like, HIV doesn't exist, that's pretty fucking dangerous. Or like, you know, I can treat my kids with this toxic substance or some... yes, yeah, why is that a question?
some people's and institutions' misinformation more permissible than others? Welcome,
a good question.
You 4.8 million glorious, shimmering souls making your journey through life. Sometimes there is doubt, but after that doubt, there will be more light, more awakening yet to come. This we can undertake together if we're willing to be forgiving and engage with one another in polite, open conversations, not fleeing to the margins, hurling rocks at one another.
Okay, this is Russell trying to do like based centrist super spiritualism or something, but you know, whatever. Did I cover the Joe Rogan apology before I got here? No, I haven't covered the apology of Joe Rogan at all. The apology, no. But I mean, we're going to be talking about it now with Russell Brand.
Across a perpetual divide, particularly if you ever suspect that these divisions might be a deliberate part of a plan to prevent us coming together. Let's see how those points...
yeah, that's pretty obvious. Yeah, of course.
And that deluge of information, that barrage of platitudes I just bombarded you with, relate to the Joe Rogan story. Let's break it down. Obviously, what you know has happened is Joe Rogan had some guests on his podcast that spoke about coronavirus, mandates, vaccines, etc. Now, of course, Joe Rogan has already said that he's sorry and that he's going to do better. So Joe Rogan, whether or not as a response to Spotify or as a response to his own feelings, has apologized. So that's the end of that.
The apology wasn't really an apology. He didn't say like, I'm sorry I fucked up. He said, I'm sorry some people took it that way. That's apologizing for other people's, like, what you perceive as other people's failures. Whatever, dude, whatever. I want to hear where this titan of intellect takes us on this.
That, in a way, isn't it? He said, all right, I'll do better now. So let's have a look at what else is going on around this subject and what it tells us. Before we do that, let's look at the timeline. 2 weeks ago, 270 doctors demanded Spotify censor Joe Rogan and take action against the mass misinformation. Now, remember, we did a video on that, and obviously you now know that many of those people weren't doctors. One person was a vet. I love vets. Another person was a podcaster. I love podcasters. But
I never got a chance to look into who the 270 people were. Yeah, I don't know. It was one of those things of like, so a bunch of people got together and they're like, we think that Spotify should do something about Joe Rogan. I think anybody could say that and it should carry weight. But obviously people who are experts in the field should be the ones leading the charge. And look at this. I would imagine, because like he's saying like one was a vet, one was a podcaster. Well, there's 270 people on that list. Like, was the majority of them not doctors or scientists at least? And I don't know if you know this or not, Russell Brand, but veterinarians administer vaccines as well. They could be quite familiar with virology. Quite a bit more than burned out fucking former movie star YouTubers. So I don't know, man.
It's weird. It shows that there's an agenda at play, even presenting them as sort of doctors, and then, you know, they're not doctors. That's the management of information. That's what we're talking about here. The management of information. Which stories are amplified? Which stories are ignored? Has there been misinformation elsewhere across the course of the pandemic? I mean, just run your own mental check here. Do you remember ever being told anything during this pandemic which later on has proven not to be true? Have you at any point been told stuff? Let's have a look at that later. So,
the only one that I can actually think of at the moment was when they were trying to prevent a scare of people just buying up masks before they had a bunch. So they said that masking wasn't necessarily essential. That could have been due to a lack of information, but I think more than likely it was because they were trying to avoid a panic and hoarding. Which, once it became obvious that masks were necessary, that's exactly what fucking happened. So, I don't know. Would I agree with that decision? Not really.
So Neil Young demanded his music be pulled from Spotify. Other artists joined, such as Joni Mitchell. Heart-wrenching, really, isn't it? Because like these are all people that we totally like. I'm old enough to sort of love Neil Young and Joni Mitchell. So like, I'm like, oh no. The hashtag delete Spotify and Spotify deleted trended. That's going to scare them. But what will scare them at Spotify even more? Share price fell. It lost over $2 billion in market value.
Yeah, that's the market responding. That's the market responding. Like, isn't that like what people who are pro-capitalism and pro-freedom want? Is that if something happens and the consumers don't like it, they respond. And then you see that effect on the finances. Like it's literally free market at work right there. Right there. Joni Mitchell is a polio survivor? Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. See, the thing is, like, whether you agree with Neil Young or Joni Mitchell, every single person in America should be celebrating them being having an ability to make that choice and standing up for their beliefs. Joe Rogan's standing up for his beliefs. They can't. It's bizarre. It's super bizarre. And if somebody doesn't really quite understand like how that balances out, it's because they're too fucking politically motivated to really be able to see things in a clear way on this.
One thing people don't like in big business, I've noticed, is people taking away their money. Amazon and Apple Music have since flaunted support for Neil Young with special deals and playlists. Now, you might have seen the brilliant Breaking Points video where Crystal and Saga talk about the financial interests that could be at play. Purely speculative, well worth a watch, because they point out that many great artists have sold their back catalogue, because 70% of the music we listen to is old back catalogue stuff. So there's a huge value in these things. So it's not straightforward matter of principles. I'm making no accusations, certainly not around heroes like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, but there is a financial component. And when there is a financial component in a capitalist consumer democracy, you have to consider that as one of the factors. Well, let's take...
Right. The stock price aren't consumers, but investors that believe that the price is going to fall. Right. And that's, like, again, I mean, whether or not you're talking about a direct effect from, like, consumers or the market responds to it, like this, it's largely a big part of it. There is a shit ton. Also, because in Brand's not declaratively stating which way it's going this way or the other, but I know which way he's implying. There's a fuck ton of money in anti-vaccine sentiment. A fuck ton. And a fuck ton of political weight.
Take that off the table, the main thing we all live our lives by, that you have to do a job to get money. Forget that. Now, let's look at morals and ethics and those things that you barely notice till someone tries to use it against you as a weapon. Young said of Amazon, all listeners to Amazon Music will automatically get 4 months free. Amazon has been leading the pack in bringing high-res audio to the masses, and it's a great place to enjoy my entire catalogue in the highest quality available. Luckily, there are no side effects, like Amazon's had no impact on workers' rights, the economy, the ecology.
Well, this is just whataboutism. What the fuck, dude? That's just whataboutism. Like, well, they're going to be doing this thing. Well, what about all the bad stuff that they've done? Well, yeah, sure. Of course. You could protest Amazon for that, too. I mean, is Russell Brand trying to like call Neil Young a hypocrite because like Amazon has done bad things too? It's so dumb.
Oh my God. I mean, again, not to asperse Neil Young, because none of us are perfect, most of all myself.
Yeah, but you just did. That's exactly what you did. That's exactly what he's fucking doing.
But if what
It's
you
just
have is a.
the thing is when you do things like this, I find people who do this kind of shit so fucking cowardly. So fucking cowardly. Like you throw out there this condemnation of somebody and they're like, "But I'm not really trying to." You just fucking did. Sack the fuck up.
Kind of ideological agenda, then surely, when you're talking about Amazon, you're going to have a little bit of reticence about banging the drum, because you'll be like, also though, the songs that I sang for years and years that directly address sort of what Amazon's come to typify. Just over a year ago, Young sold 50% of his publishing rights to his entire song catalogue to Hypnosis Song Fund, a UK-based investment fund, in a deal worth a reported $150 million. In 2021, Hypnosis Song Management launched a $1 billion partnership with Blackstone, the investment company, currently buying up entire American neighborhoods, pushing up prices, and in turn preventing families owning their homes.
So what? I mean, like, that's shit. That's terrible. Blackstone is a fucking vile, nasty, evil fucking corporation. But so what? Like, what does this have to do? Like, is this whole video just going to be like Russell Brand being like Neil Young is actually a piece of shit and that's why you should like Joe Rogan? Is that what this is supposed to be? Chat, please help me out with this because I don't even understand what the point of all this is.
Okay. In a sense, it's difficult, isn't it? You've really got to choose your battles. And even specifically on the subject of misinformation, and even specifically on the subject of misinformation around this peculiar, traumatizing pandemic, you've got to be careful about misinformation. Stay with this video right to the end, because we're going to look at where else you might have seen misinformation over the complex arc of the last couple of years. Blackstone's senior advisor is Jeffrey B. Kindler, former chairman and CEO of Pfizer. Pfizer. I've heard of that. Would Pfizer have any interest in a...
Is he building a fucking conspiracy theory that, like, it comes from the top down with Pfizer, Blackstone, to Amazon, like, to the holding company for Neil Young, to Neil Young? Is that what he's doing? That's crazy.
a particular... No, sorry, I sidetracked. I'm sorry about that.
I think if there's anything that I've done that I could do better is have more experts with differing opinions right after I have the controversial ones. I would most certainly be open to doing that.
Well, I would really like to see him bring Peter Hotez back onto his show. That would be great. That would be great. And the thing is, if Joe means that, then Joe should do that.
And I would like to talk to some people that have differing opinions on those podcasts in the future.
I suppose Joe Rogan has got to take this on board. Some of you might think, if you're an ardent Joe Rogan fan, oh man, he's changed his position, he's selling out. But actually, what Joe Rogan's doing is he's emerging into a pretty unique, unique territory that now is going to place unique demands on him as the sort of nexus of corporate, political, medical demands all intersect. My personal opinion, and I don't offer these lightly, is that you want to hear everybody. You want to hear everybody, and like
it's honestly a hollow and pointless virtue to signal when you're talking about something like more relevant and important right now. In the broader scope of things, I agree. I think conversations are good. I think that it's important to hear differing opinions on different things. 100%. The problem is, and this is the part that everybody keeps fucking ignoring, this is the part that's driving me fucking up the goddamn wall. Everybody wants to gloss over. They get into this conversation about, well, we need to have like this open dialogue. We need to have a huge freedom of speech and talk about this and talk about that and talk about this and talk about that. Yes, of course we do. Yes. Except we're in the middle of a fucking pandemic. It's a bit different. Like, we live in an unprecedented point in time when something is happening that is a huge, huge fucking problem. That we're in the middle of it. We're trying to deal with it right fucking now. And the idea of both sidesing this sort of thing The repercussion of that can be measured in human life. That is different. Well, does that mean that you cave on your convictions? When it comes to a fucking global pandemic, it means that you have to modify. You have to be a fucking adult about it, not just a fucking middle school level mentality where you're like, in all ways, absolutism, this is how we must always do it. Dude, it's naive, it's ignorant, it's fucking childish. No, it's stupid. Like, yeah, in a broad sense, he's right. In a broad sense, he's right. But when you are in the middle of a fucking crisis, just to say that there's never a line where you might have to make sure that you're putting out only good information and otherwise people might actually, like, I don't know, die. I think Joe should have more opposing opinions on the same time. No, I think that Joe should never have another anti-vaxxer on his show, period, until after the pandemic is over. Then he can have as many as he fucking wants. I wouldn't care. I'd rather he didn't, but I wouldn't be able to say that he's wrong to do it. But in the middle of a pandemic, no, there's no fucking reason for it.
Like, what Joe Rogan's come from is literally something he done like on his own to something that now is sort of set in the news agenda around the world. So obviously that would require adjustment for anybody who finds themselves in that position.
So my pledge to you is that I will do my best to try to balance out these more controversial viewpoints with other people's perspectives so we can maybe find a better point of view.
Also, what Joe Rogan's saying here is that I'm willing to evolve and change in pursuit of something better. You never see the mainstream media address something in this manner. That's why Joe Rogan is so popular. Joe Rogan's not a bloody news channel. It's a podcast conversation.
Yeah, but unfortunately, vastly more people are getting their opinions and getting informed by Joe Rogan than news channels. That's just it's a fucking cop-out. It's a fucking cop-out. Well, you know, he's not really a news channel. Doesn't matter. People are still gonna fucking, like, take what they consume from his show. They're still gonna fucking consume it. Nobody's gonna be, if people hear things that, like, cater to their preconceived notions, their fears, their platforms, the way in which they've been believing things to go, there's nothing in their brain that goes like, well, it's not a news channel, so... Especially when you have somebody on who claims to be, like, the inventor of mRNA fucking technology. He sounds like he should be an expert. He's an anti-vaxxer. They're not going to be like, well, it was on Joe Rogan, so I shouldn't believe that this guy knows what he's talking about. That's fucking naive. It's a cop-out. It's bullshit. Bullshit.
Conversation, for one thing. So comparing it directly to science is a bit unfair, and comparing it to mainstream media, and we know where they're funded and what their agenda can often be regarded as, you know, that's already an unfair comparison. Now have a look at this.
It's not an unfair comparison, and you're playing damage control. It's bullshit.
This is Rachel Maddow talking about vaccinations earlier in the pandemic. Now let me be clear here. I have absolutely no opinion on your life and your...
Hang on. Okay. The problem is that public emergencies can be used to government's advantage to seize more power. True. True. Just like 9/11 was used by the Bush administration to justify going to war, they used a public emergency to seize power. Here's the problem. Here's the problem with that. Bush taking a bunch of soldiers into Iraq because of 9/11 is not the same fucking thing as a global pandemic. It's not. It's not the same. It's saying, like, just possibly, you know, they can use an emergency to do that sort of thing is not an argument that we don't also have to take into consideration that these things are really, really important and that maybe we need to be, like, willing to do what needs to happen to make it stop. Especially because, and this is really important, we do have, based in scientific literature and scientific consensus, knowable when we can actually start to relax. We understand what levels of herd immunity we need. We're not there yet. We can see it. We have a number. When we get to that, we can declare quite definitively that there can be, like, a ceasing of this need for mandates. The fact that it's been so fucked up and shittily implemented by so many different fucking states and constantly fucked over is even more of an implication that the government is not in any way competent enough to utilize this emergency in any major nefarious way. Because if they could, we wouldn't have such a massive fuck up right now. So this notion of that we have to be afraid of the government overreach, they can barely even fucking do anything right now. Like, I reject that notion completely. And if we have to go through like a really hard time because of this fucking pandemic, and then we finally get it under control, and then the government wants to keep up that degree of control, I'll be out there in the streets with you, side by side with the fucking anti-vaxxers, yelling, "No, motherfucker, no more. You give up what we gave you in order for this crisis." Like, nah, I reject that. I reject it wholeheartedly.
Or medical procedures. Of course I don't. Why would I? What do I know? What could I claim to know? I've never been to university or higher education of any kind, except for showing off school, which I think is pretty apparent. Now, Rachel Maddow here, while towing the official line, and what was believed at the time, maybe if you take skepticism and cynicism and doubt and interest in conspiracy completely out of this, this is Rachel Maddow saying, get vaccinated. Once you're vaccinated, the virus stops. The virus can no longer transmit.
Now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person. A vaccinated person gets exposed to the virus does not infect them. The virus cannot then use that person to go anywhere else.
Wow, what a stupid fucking thing for Rachel Maddow to say. Anybody who's like learned about vaccines in college can tell you that that's not true. We could say you can be vaccinated against measles, and if you're immersed in like a fucking house full of goddamn kids with measles or some shit, if that fucking happened or anything, and you walk out of the house and are like immediately in contact with somebody who's immunocompromised and isn't vaccinated from measles, they could get it from you. Like what an absolutely stupid fucking thing for Rachel to say. Holy shit.
Now that's not true. Maybe Rachel Maddow, and here's what I would say, Rachel Maddow, at the time she said it, believed it was true. So cool.
Maybe.
Forgive Rachel Maddow for making a mistake. Rachel Maddow is a human being. But she said...
Could Moderna and Pfizer release a recipe for their vaccines to give it to other pharmaceutical companies for better distribution? Yeah, they have. Yeah. Also, look into Peter Hotez, Hotez. He is currently right now heading up a team, and they are on the verge of basically pushing out a huge humanitarian effort to, for free, vaccinate the entire developing world. They're doing everything they can to actually do it. Like, it's there's no secret hidden secret with the like how the vaccines are made or what's in them or anything like that. No. Nah, it's not a hidden thing.
She said something that's not true. That's misinformation. That's the same thing. She said it on the news. Are you going to see that? Are you going to see, hey, listen, we were wrong about that, we were wrong about that, we were wrong about that? See, in a sense, it doesn't really matter. As George Bernard Shaw said, it's not whether you treat people well or treat people badly, but that you treat everybody the same. Now, I would prefer that you treat people well. But the idea that you've got a principle, a guiding light, is necessary, because otherwise what happens is the most powerful interests in the world just dominate the way narratives go, and when you start realizing there are financial undertones to any particular story, it's impossible to extract them from the outcome of the narrative, from the intention of the story. So again, I'm not criticizing Rachel Maddow or Joe Rogan. Like, these are all people, human beings, you know, like you and me, living in the world. What I'm saying is when there's an agenda or a sort of an intention, let's look at what the component parts could be. That's the purpose of our channel. Not
what agenda? This is what I'm really trying to figure out, is like, what kind of agenda is he implying that there is?
Not to tell you what to do with your life, not to tell you what to believe in, what not to do, or what to do, just to say, what might this be? What might it be? Let's look as best we can, knowing that we're not perfect either, but together, 4.8 million of us, maybe we can get somewhere. You'll love this piece by Branko Markotic in Jacobin, talking about Joe Rogan's challenges here. If we were being honest about the situation, we'd admit that Rogan's just one of many purveyors of COVID misinformation, and that the others include a who's who of liberal politicians, public health officials, and mainstream press outlets, the very sources we're told are the most trustworthy and mainstream voices on the pandemic, and who are pointing the finger at Rogan now.
That's interesting. I want to know who they're talking about. I would say the top two voices that people get their information from as far as viewership, Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, both push vastly more vaccine misinformation than anybody else.
From the very start, the messaging on the pandemic from these quarters has been abysmal, politically calibrated, contradictory, and smugly confident in its wrongness. First, the coronavirus was obviously nothing to worry about. Then avoiding it became the most important thing in the world. Everyone knew masks were useless and not worth wearing, until everyone knew it was the opposite. Do you personally remember each one of those pivots? I do. And I'm not suggesting that there's anything malfeasant occurring. But if you can track that misinformation and then track the interests of certain powerful groups, and if you were to see a corollary, that would be interesting, I suppose. Some of this owed to the initial lack of information about the virus, as well as its constantly evolving nature.
Look, I'm going to just point out, and it's very, very simple. One of the main reasons why we have so much misinformation push right now about COVID and about vaccines is political. And you can see it. You can totally see it. When Trump was in office and Trump had the Trump vaccine and it was Operation Warp Speed. Now, don't get me wrong, just as a caveat, yeah, I know there's plenty of people on the left who are like, I'm not taking a Trump vaccine, blah, blah, blah. And those people were dumb, okay? They were stupid. I never said that shit. I had reservations and whatnot, of course, but like, you know, wasn't like, oh no, fuck vaccine. But as soon as you know, Trump was not going to be the future president, is when this started ramping up. Right away. That's when. To think that there's not an absolute political agenda at play right now to cast doubt on the vaccines, and in fact to probably perpetuate the pandemic even further. All to be able to say, well, Joe Biden couldn't fucking cure the pandemic. Like, come on, man. Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
So, like, you can imagine them defending it. Yeah, but we didn't know that then. Oh, what? But Joe Rogan's got to be perfect. But as that last entirely unforced error by public health experts show, far too much of it wasn't. There are too many instances of this incessant intellectual whiplash to list, especially in the United States. Public health experts overwhelmingly agreed a national stay-at-home order was needed to stop the virus until the liberal science-believing candidate they backed won and ruled it out, at which point they never mentioned it again.
Wait. That's not necessarily true at all. That's not true at all. And also, it's kind of funny calling Joe Rogan or Joe Biden liberal. But anyway, public health experts overwhelmingly agreed a national stay-at-home order was needed. They still do. They still talk about, you know, fucking sheltering in place. Unfortunately, the screams of, and this is not just from one political side or the other, it's from both sides of the economy, eventually won out. And you can't really pin that on one side or the other. That's a lot of people. That's you know, Democrats, Republicans, tons. You'll have fucking people making like $5,000 a year, living in a fucking trailer park, barely making by, eating fucking mac and cheese and being like, yeah, I mean, I don't want grandma to die, but what about our economy? Like, just, you know. And what about it? Is it really helping you that much there, buddy?
Trump's pledge to roll out a vaccine within a year was an objective falsehood to the point it was fact-checked at the time, only for media outlets to criticize him for rolling it out too slowly once exactly that happened.
I don't recall that at all. I don't recall that at all. That's really strange. Joe Biden didn't personally suck the COVID out of your ears with his mouth, failed president. Yeah.
His challenger's liberal running mate publicly aired a vaccine hesitancy talking point an attitude that has become unconscionable and beyond the pale among her supporters once she entered the White House.
His challenger's liberal running mate publicly aired a vaccine hesitancy talking point. Is he talking about Kamala Harris? Is he talking about Kamala Harris? I think she might have said something that sounded like vaccine hesitancy and whatnot. I don't know. I don't like Kamala either, so whatever.
So again, this is what this.
Let's just. I'm not gonna finish watching this whole video because it's honestly like giving me brainworms. But let's let him get to the end of this point.
Channel is for, to help us understand together how truth is used, which types of truth or information are promoted, and which types of truth are embargoed, which type of people are sanctioned to communicate, which kind of people are censored from communicating. That's one thread of information that you can look at and follow. This is happening to this person for saying that. This is happening to this person for saying that. Oh, nothing's happening to this person for saying that.
All right. Okay, so there we go. That's a pretty good pause. Here's the problem, though. And this is something that Brand isn't really talking about, and it's honestly probably one of the most salient points that we need to keep in mind. The sum and total of this is very simple. When all of this started happening, and people weren't sure, and people were confused, and people were scrambling, was there any real solid position where we could understand this and blah, 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 blah? No. Were people going to fuck up? Yes. Can you point blame at all of it? Sure, if you want to. But what I would say, and it's the same thing that I've mentioned before, is like when other pandemics have happened, when other like horribly infectious diseases rampage through, there was plenty of times where people weren't really sure what the best course of action was, et cetera, et cetera. But all that aside, who should you be listening to? Which version of what media outlets, this, that, and the other thing? Honestly, we should not be basing our information around which news channel we're watching, or what some dickbag in a bow tie says, or what some crusty burnout hippie is gonna fucking say. Listen to the experts. Listen to the fucking experts. For every one Robert Malone sitting there parroting anti-vax fucking talking points, there are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of experts in just as relevant of fields saying he's wrong. He's wrong. But how do you get those people and their voices, any of them, elevated to the same level that Malone did by going on Joe Rogan once? How do you combat that? Because they might, don't get me wrong, the people who know what they're talking about, who aren't anti-vaxxers, they could get it wrong too. But they're more likely going to get it more right more often than somebody who is legitimately pushing propaganda like Malone and fucking who's Rogan having on next? Majid Nawaz? Jesus fuck. Come on, man. So how do we get those voices up to like the same level as these anti-vaxxer voices that are elevated by Joe Rogan? Unless Joe Rogan puts them on. You know? And then, unfortunately, people will have to make the decision between a lie and a truth as if they're equal. And that's the problem. So it's food for thought. Do I have any good answers for it? I do not. But I hope that people consider it, at least in this way, and not in some dumb fucking light and centrist kind of way. Right!